So move back to law of detachment, no matter where you are on the worksheet. Since I'm looking at a premise bar, first thing I'm going to do is put down some therefore symbols. And even though I know that all of these are detachment, I should check to see that the second premise is the hypothesis. That's the hypothesis, that's the same thing, that's the same thing. Now I can move on. If I don't see that pattern or any of the other patterns we've talked about, it's not valid. So in this case, for detachment, I put that there. This comes down to here. This comes down to here. Whatever is here, no matter how big or how many pieces of information are in the conclusion, I bring that down.
Do you have a quick time this?
No. Up here, yes, you need it because it's part of the conditional, but down here, no, you wouldn't. For 5 and 6, let's convert this into symbols. It's fairly simple to figure this out in your head, but when you have 7 or 8 of these linked together and you have to pick out pieces, it's easier to look at symbols rather than entire sentences and paragraphs. So when I see this and I see if and then, I put my symbol. I change "you deserve a break today" into a B. "You should have lunch." I make L. Then the second premise involves deserving a break, so I'll put B again. So my symbolic version of that looks like that. Does that look like detachment? So detachment tells me I bring that down. L, for me, represented "should have lunch," so I'm going to write down "therefore," and I will be more specific to the case that's in front of me. Mr. Willard should have lunch.
So you already have to put there for.
Yep. I'd like it to match up. Technically, you wouldn't necessarily have to, but I'm doing that right now so that we can see that that is that. Sometimes you don't see an exact if-then statement. It's still a conditional statement, it just doesn't have the words if and then in it. If someone is a friend of Jim Kavanaugh, then that person is a friend of mine. If you think of it that way. I'm going to convert it again. I would write it this way. Any friend of Jim implies a friend of mine. Alex is a friend of Jim. So I've got my detachment pattern right in front of me. According to that, I should bring down the M. I called this phrase M. So I will write down, using the specific information in the premise, Alex is a friend of mine.
What is premise?
Premise is a given statement that you're assuming to be absolutely true. And that's how it would look symbolically. Law of contrapositive, you could show this a couple different ways. You could do one bar, therefore, and show the switching and the negation all in one step. Or you could put the negation of the second one, which in this case would be M, followed by the negation of the first one. How many people did it this way? Anybody do it this way? Okay. This would be negation T implies R. This would be Y implies negation X. You can see it either way. Textbooks show it both ways.
Sir,
Yep.
on this
this, which one will most likely come out?
I don't know. Just be ready for both. You also might see the phrase logically equivalent. For our purposes here, we're talking about both being true. Therefore, they're logically equivalent. They have the same truth value. What'd you come up with for something that was the contrapositive of this phrase right here?
3.
3? Did we have 3? Remember to switch and negate both parts. And the second one, same thing. We have logically equivalent.
1.
Number 1? Look good? Next page. We're talking law of syllogism, which should make you think of chain rule, which makes you think of a link, and in the back of your mind you're thinking to yourself, this is just transitive property in a different form. Look for a link. Link, link, link from a conclusion to a hypothesis, link. Make sure that you are following the path of the arrows. A implies C. E implies negation G. T implies Q. If you wrote Q first, you're going against the grain. If I start at Q, I can't go in that direction because the arrow is pointing at me. I've got to start at T and snake my way to the Q. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And where is the T? Is the T in the hypothesis or the conclusion to start with? So we should have it in the hypothesis down here. So what should I have for the last one?
P is equivalent to M.
Follow the arrows. P
P to M.
leads to M. I can't start with M because I'd be going against the arrow.
It's 2. So it's technically just upside down.
You want to make sure you're going from a hypothesis to a conclusion. Right. If you just lifted this premise up and put it above it, then you'd have the same case as the other. It's just in a different order. Are we good on that?
Yes.
Let's make up our own symbols. Monday means school. School means homework. Do we have a link? It's got to be from a conclusion to a hypothesis, or what results from that. M implies H. Well, what did that mean in terms of this? Therefore, if it's still an if-then statement, so I have to write an if-then statement. If today is Monday, then I have homework. Pretty easy when you have just 2 statements to start with, or 2 conditionals, but what if you have 9 or 10? It might be easier to make things into symbols and deal with the laws that way. Same with number 6. New York City means New York State. New York State means I live near Canada. I'm using NYS to be our link. The answer is still an if-then statement, but now it's New York City results in Canada. Therefore, if I live in New York City, then I live near Canada. Those are simple little laws that we're using this year. There's many more laws that if you get into a higher level geometry course or logic course or discrete math course that you will learn, not this year. So those are the only ones we're going to be dealing with.